in the end, you need to, we always say in the beginning, to really, get to know each other as human beings. And what do you stand for? What is important to you? What is the purpose of your organization? Can we align on what I call under the waterline? What we see above the waterline of an iceberg is our behavior, and that's perfectly fine. But our behavior is a result of everything that's within us. And if we can share about those things, then we really have deepened conversations, profound conversations of what is leading us. And I think in the end, that's what solves really big problems.
Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Kirsten Heukels, and on this podcast I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to episode 106. If you're an investor or founder, you probably know that co-founder conflict is one of the leading reasons that startups fail. So, why does trust break down between people who share the same vision? And what can we do to build stronger relationships from the start? For the answers to these questions, I talked to Kirsten Heukels. Kirsten is the co-founder of 142 Social Innovation and an expert in complex communication who helps teams build psychological safety, trust, and resilience. Over the course of our conversation, you'll learn why communication is much more complex than it looks, how trust is built in daily behavior, that is, how you listen, respond, and show up when it matters most, and what having 4 generations in today's workplace means for founders and leaders. Plus, you'll hear what working with Manchester United taught Kirsten about pressure, power, and team dynamics. So, when you're ready to listen and learn how to decode human behavior in the workplace, please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Kirsten Heukels. Good morning.
Good
Good to have
morning.
you. A question I always ask at the start is how you got into your current job and current position. So, take it away.
To start with current position, currently we have a company, three actually. One is focusing on training and coaching. One
Mm-hmm.
is focusing on confidential counseling for organizations since 2018. The third one is focusing on crisis and hostage negotiation and kinetic interrogation or interviewing. So actually everything that has to do with human communication, complex situations, is something that we try to prevent from training and coaching. But if it does occur, we can also solve things. That's currently the situation. How I got there is 25 years of starting out actually as a mediator when it was just coming to the Netherlands 25 years ago, and broadening the horizons to training, coaching, international and organizational culture from Hofstede. And in the end, also profiling. I got educated on micro expressions, facial micro expressions, body
Mm-hmm.
language, and uses of voice. And with profiling, I use that 3-dimensional to make analysis of individuals and groups to actually explain human behavior, but also predict human behavior. So reactive, proactive. That's the short version of how I got here. But
Okay, well, then I'm curious about the long version. What I was wondering about what makes human communication so complex.
I think what makes it complex is that we have more than 8 billion people. This means more than 8 billion perceptions. Perception is just as unique as your DNA is. Facials are also that unique. So the simple fact that we share a language or something like that is not enough to understand each other. And I think culture plays a big part in this. So we mostly don't know enough about each other's cultures to really understand what the other person is saying or people are saying. And I also think that in current times, the amount of information that reaches us every day is so much that we just can't process it all without just judging and putting it into compartments and not really having the time to really digest or research the information that you take that
that you
you
take in.
yeah to take in, but also to really digest it. What am I seeing, what am I hearing, what am I yeah. And I also think we not every culture teaches their children or their young people to use the words close to their hearts, so we kind of are getting into a zone where we use container words like respect and that kind of thing that means everything to everybody, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't specify what you mean by it. And I also think, now that I'm thinking of it, that taking things personally is also a big problem.
Has
I
that
had to learn that
increased?
really. I really had to learn that myself. But sorry.
Is that something that is increasing?
Yeah, I think
That
so. But
people
it
are.
was always there. It was always there. I think that people really are wired in a way that if it's for me, it's against you, and that's not the same thing. If it's for me, it's not against you. It's just for me. But I don't think that this distinguishment is always made at the right time to make the right conversation going
Is
to
that
get there.
also why especially maybe a really deep dive all of a sudden, but is that also why men perceive the whole diversity debate as a sort of zero sum game? So we do something in favor of women that comes at a cost to men?
I think there were a few people that said really interesting things about that, because the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman said that people are allergic to loss,
Hmm.
and that is why men mostly see it as a null sum game. But Dr. Naomi Fields, and she's a behavioral analyst, she said diversity is not a cake that you get a smaller piece from. You get a bigger party where more people are at the table. And I think the perception of diversity and inclusion is broadly misunderstood. It's not just men and women. It's far broader than that. So it's also about generations, about life phases. It's about culture. It's about broadening your horizons and trying to get more knowledge to process all the information that you digest every day.
Yeah. So, and that's going back to what you said earlier, also why it's so really important to be able to digest that
Yeah,
information.
yeah,
And if
and take your time
and
to
take
do
your
that.
time.
Yeah.
So how can people do that in a time, let's say, where we get so, indeed, to your point, that we get so much information.
Well,
I
I
have a
think
hard time dealing with all the information prompts that I get on a daily basis. Human brain, I think, is wired to do like 95% on autopilot. So you need
yeah.
to a certain extent really to put things in boxes to be able to deal with it.
No, I agree. I think everybody has the same problem nowadays. 95% of our behavior is actually mostly unconscious.
Hmm.
So let that sink in. But how we could do this in profiling, we use fight, flight, freeze, because every human being can do these three things. You
Hmm.
have to train them, but you're open to learn. So and the more experiences you have, the better you learn how to use them. What we do as human beings is default to a certain survival technique.
Hmm.
Like my default technique is flight. But if I think about things, I always
How do you
say,
find out what your default
yeah, you
is?
can find out. Because if you ask yourself questions, how do I behave in certain situations? What do I do? What do I think? What do I feel? then you can distinguish between fight, flight, and freeze, because they are very distinguished. And but you can do them all. I always say, when nobody's dying and nothing is on fire,
Mm.
literally, you have time.
Yeah.
And it would be really helpful for everyone to sometimes ask themselves, what is my best strategy right now, instead
Yeah.
of defaulting to your favorite. And everybody has a favorite. That's okay. But I think
So,
that would really make conversations different, and
mhm.
it would really deepen, make more profound conversations yeah,
Yeah,
going on.
but I think it would also give people sort of mental rest because they at least that's what I have when I meditate. It's literally a point where I think in the first 10 minutes or so, all the options sort of pass my in my brain, and then after 10 minutes, it quietens down.
There are more ways than one to
Hmm.
put yourself at ease, literally.
Hmm.
And I think everybody can find their own way in how to do that, But I think it's really important. Like, I don't really watch television anymore because it just, it wakes me up at night.
Hmm.
It worries me. It's too much. It's
Hmm.
just too much information. And if I stick to what I can influence, what I can offer as a human being, and just keep my world a little bit smaller than. And it's not like I don't know what's going on in the world, but yeah, it's just a little bit. I back down on world news, also because it's very hard to find out what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is not true,
Hmm. Yeah.
who is saying what, and before you know it, you're living in like twilight zones, and I don't want to live there. I just want to be able to, even if it's a small step for people or a small contribution to society, I choose that.
So I was wondering, because you're a confidential counselor, what prompted you to become one? What triggered you? What made it interesting?
Well, I think in the end, my whole career was built around a deep conviction that I feel that every human being should have some kind of legal certainty in their lives. And we live in a democracy that really offers that
Hmm.
in a broad sense. But we can always do better. But I think that's when I studied law, that's why I started to study law. I think becoming a mediator was also contributing to that conviction. And I think confidential counseling really does the same thing. And we started before the television broadcasts of Bose. So we were at it for a while at that time. And it's something that really contributes to a better, healthier, safer, and more diverse society. And I think that's really, in the end, yeah, something that I find purposeful.
How is that relationship? How does it contribute to a safer society?
If I stick to the Netherlands, then what we saw is that there was a long time of that of not talking about these things until actually the Bose broadcast, and things were happening, but they weren't really spoken about.
Hmm.
Now there's a time that everybody feels more space to talk about things, so you see that there's more talking about it. But you also see that some people say, oh, we can't say anything anymore. We can't do anything anymore. And that's not true. We just need to find a new normal by talking to each other about what is right for you, what is right for me. How do we coexist in a way that, doesn't damage anyone? But you need to have a real conversation about those things. So it's not about reporting something and then damaging someone else. It's about really finding out where, as a society, is our new normal. And I think the profession of confidential counseling, if you try to do it right, really contributes to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So for context, the BOS, that's BOS, maybe describe what this was about for, let's say, non-Dutch listeners, because it was
It,
really, I think it really triggered something in Dutch society,
yeah, it
like
did. It
like the
did.
Black Pete discussion, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, true. The Bose broadcast told us about a big company that, that actually produced a television show that was watched by a lot of Dutch people, in which a few of the leading men were accused of unwanted behavior towards mostly young, very young women.
Yeah, but also to between one of the jurors to the other,
Yeah,
which surprised me a lot. That
yeah, yeah,
even on let's say sort of an equal level, one juror was accused of I don't know if that's still out there, the accusation, but it was really powerful that he was seen as like really badly behaving
yeah.
and blackmailing the woman.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest problems. I think in societies is when power or people feel some kind of power, because power in itself, I think, is not a bad thing if you can use it in the right way. But there are very little people who can really handle power well,
Yeah,
and that makes this is the root of a lot of problems.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And what struck me also about the whole broadcast is the response that the CEO, the chief executive officer of the broadcasting company had. Like, A, didn't know, and B, I wish people would report this.
yeah,
And that sort of triggered two things in me. One is that, yes, people should report this. And two, if they don't report it, doesn't it tell you something about your culture?
it does. I think at that time, this really opened up a lot of conversations and a lot of different, different sides to the conversation. But I think his response is still a response that you even now hear sometimes. There were a lot of places that he thought people would or could go to within the company.
Yeah,
Statistics show that people don't report within the company that fast because they're afraid of their career. In this case, the young talents also said, I'm not going to decline anything my coach or mentor is going to offer me because that will lead to repercussions to my own career. So in hierarchy, it's very difficult for people to handle the power of other people.
hmm,
And I think it's always more the responsibility of the powerful one in this case to really be conscious of the fact that you are the one that's probably needs to be the wisest,
yeah.
actually.
So how do you build a culture where people feel free to report? Is that possible, you think?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think it's possible there are a lot of things that can lead to a safer culture and a more inclusive culture. I think that having different kinds of people, and because the funny thing is, mostly people hire people that look like them, because empathy is mostly felt towards people that look like you. But empathy is therefore not only a good thing, but it can be a thing that leads to exclusion and to segregation and to discrimination. And people mostly don't know that, but it's really also an aspect of empathy. So you need to really think about what does our company need, because sometimes it's really good to hire someone that's not like you and that you totally don't know what you have to do with them, or because they have different perceptions. And that's good. That's where you learn, and that's where people get you towards a little bit out of your comfort zone instead of into it. So I think there are a lot of, but also being an example. Culture is something that is actually a top down thing.
Hmm.
You need to have culture bearers at the top of your organization that really do something about it, but also live it and walk the talk. And you see CEOs that say, yeah, no, I'm all for, and then you see them having a parking space next to the entrance with their name on it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then I'm like, okay.
yeah. And or they have an open door policy. They're just in meetings all day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's
Yeah, I have
small
a good
things, but it's
example.
also big things. Yeah.
There's one example from my own past that comes to mind now, which is it's a funny anecdote. I started working at ING head office in I think 2000, and it was just before we moved into the new glass building next to the A10. Because this was an open, supposed to be an open space building, we were being prepared, and I was in the legal and compliance department, which is like, if you get to hierarchy, this is where hierarchy sort of starts.
Was invented.
It was invented, you would say. So there were these very well, relatively old lawyers who were like, okay, now I need to get out of an office into an open space, which, and having an office at that time was really like a sign of seniority. So they felt demoted almost. But then the director of the department organized a field day, and everyone was there, and we discussed how we were going to do that. And one of the consultants who was helping us said, well, it's not about you. This is, everyone will be in an open space. And
Yeah.
then that's when it hit the director, because he was like, um,
Me too.
well, they are going to be in an open space and I will have an office. And that's when the rebellion started, because everyone was like, and even he got corrected, fortunately, by the consultant. The end result, by the way, was that everyone had his own office except for the really junior stuff like me. But yeah, that
There is
just goes
something to
to
say
show.
about, because I don't know if open offices always work, because people do need a little bit of their own space, and to also reload or focus, or it's I don't know if it's always a working strategy.
My personal experience is that it's okay to have open space offices for work that, let's say, does not require a lot of concentration. So it's really good for team spirit, I found out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work if you can't have a meeting on the floor. So
No.
you need to have those separate spaces. So you need to have some sort of quote unquote offices to make it
Yeah.
work. And
Where people
sometimes
can
people
retreat.
really have
Yeah.
to be in a silent room because they have to concentrate on something. Or sometimes people are like really sensitive to noise. And then, yes, they need their own
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
So I was wondering, because one of the things, going back to the Bose example, one of the things that struck me as well is that the CEO kept pointing towards policy. So we have a
Yeah.
policy for this,
Yeah. I
and
think
it
people try to find some consolation in policies, or at least, try to show that they're working on it. Or, and I think we are one of the few external confidential counselors that really help people from beginning to end. So we make policies together with the organizations that we work for. And that's really tailor made, actually, because every organization is different. So next to judicial that
thanks.
you need to have written down, there's a lot of free, space to make your own policies. I always say to the companies we work with, in the end, of course we will have the policies in place, because that's, you have to have some kind of rules that people live by, because otherwise it's going to be one big frantic show. But when something really happens and when push comes to shove, it's the people that need to solve it together. So I need to solve it with the HR director or with the CEO. And that's never, in my experience of the last 7-8 years, that's never between 9 and 5.
No,
So, and then you need to fix it as human beings. So you can't work with everybody. And that's why I don't believe in that. You don't know who you're going to call when you're calling an external confidential counselor. You need to know who you're calling, because the step towards calling is already really big. And then you need to know that the person at the other side of the line is going to really listen to you and is not watching their stopwatch or something like that. So I think and then, policies, they are helpful, but they're not in itself the purpose of stuff.
Yeah, and
The purpose is to, yeah,
they don't
exactly.
do anything
No,
except
no.
sit on paper.
Yeah, they can support your actions, but they're not in itself the goal. So in the end, you need to. We always say in the beginning to really get to know each other as human beings, and what do you stand for, what is important to you, what is the purpose of your organization. Can we align on what I call under the waterline? What we see above the waterline of an iceberg is our behavior, and that's perfectly fine, but our behavior is a result of everything that's within us. And if we can share about those things, then we really have deepened conversations, profound conversations of what is leading us. And I think in the end, that's what solves really big problems.
Yeah. When we spoke before, you told me that this is the first time we have four generations of people in the
Yeah.
workplace. How does that impact things like trust, like inclusion, like leadership?
I think it's really demanding on people, because it's an extra dimension of really needing to understand each other, because generations have the tendency to think something about the former one, so
Hmm.
they always have something to nag about. I always say, I think it's a really unique time that we're in, and I
Hmm.
think it's the perfect time to be challenged on how well you try to find the other, your colleagues
Yeah.
in the workspace, but also in life. I think it's not that segregated, but it's demanding, I think, on leaders, because different generations and different life phases need different leadership. But I also think it's really, yeah, it's actually, I think it's a gift. So, but that's the way I look at it. Yeah, because if you look at the younger generations, they are really fast. They can really, I'm Generation X when it comes to it. And I really recognize myself in that. But I think our children are far better at watching their boundaries and not working all the time. Really, we are having conversations with them about the purpose in life and who would I be when. They really have existential questions they ask themselves at like 22. So I think we could really learn from them as they could learn from us. But I think when you're older, I think when you're young, you think you know everything, or you think you can handle the world, and I think that's a perfect thing, because otherwise you wouldn't get married, you wouldn't have kids, you wouldn't make big life decisions. And when you get older, you know for sure that you don't know for sure. And that's different, because we always say we know what it's like to be 20, but they don't know what it's like to be 50. And you shouldn't talk like that. You shouldn't talk to younger people as if you know it all, because you don't. You don't know it all.
Yeah, that's really true. Also because it doesn't hit home with them to begin with.
No, and I think also every human being has their own path, and it's like also our generation that's now in leading positions in organizations. They say about the younger generations, oh, they are always halfway around, panicking. They can't solve things. Well, I don't know what they're saying, all of it, but and then I look at them and then I say, okay, you have kids. Yeah. You raised this generation. So what are you saying? How do you treat your own child then? And I don't recognize it actually, because, when I look at the conversations we have with the kids, it's really nice. And they're in their 20s. And then I think, they're really nice human beings who are really careful with their feelings. And I think that's really something that other generations could really learn from. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And they
what
are actually far better at, switching between different information channels and that kind of stuff, and finding out things. And
but they're equally helpless if like the internet isn't there anymore.
yeah, I think that's really, and that's something also, I know, and I see that that's true in daily life. Once we had one, and she was on a station, and the train wasn't coming, or there was something wrong with, and she called her dad, and he said, I don't know why you're calling me because I'm 30 kilometers away, but ask someone who's on this
Same platform.
the same platform as you are. Yeah. So a true point, true point. But I also think this is something, you can teach your children how to interact. It's not just about the information channels, it's also about talking about stuff. They always said to us, we're over communicating in our household. But I think now they're running into their 20s, they think that was a good thing.
Is that also part of the responsibilities that leaders have in a workplace to even
I
over
think so.
communicate?
Yeah, I think there's no such thing as over communicating, because trying to understand another human being is, I think, one of the most difficult things there is. And still, because you see this as a human being, or even your partner or your family or friends, or you can love someone and still don't understand them, let alone when you don't love someone, how hard it is to really understand what they're saying. And life isn't static. People change. People need different things in different stages of their life. And it's the same thing as a mediator. When I did divorce mediation, I always thought, why are people so more, why can't more people say that get a divorce? Thank you for your time. You taught me a lot. I hope I taught you a lot.
It's
Let's
time to.
find out what life has in store for us as if now. We've had kids or not, but if we had kids, it was because I loved you really, 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 really badly. And let's go on. Thank you. But we don't do that. And that's
The
actually a shame. And the same with, it's the same in friendships or in jobs. It's not like it's normal that you have one relationship or one friendship your whole life. It's rare, it's beautiful, but it's not normal. So don't fuss about it. Thank each other. It was nice, and I loved you. I still love you, but in a different way, and that's fine. And I hope the best for you. That karmically that would be really helpful.
it would save us a lot of tension. Also, again, going back to the workplace, because the divorces impact the workplace as well.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
So,
heavily.
what kind of can you give a couple of examples of things you see in your practice as counselor that are the result of these generational differences? Like, are there specific views on how to treat people
I think
that differ from, or that are starting to become, let's say, less normal?
I think one of the things that is really an obstacle is the way that different generations treat hierarchy.
Hmm.
So the oldest generation, they think, do as you're told. That's actually the short version.
Hmm.
And younger people ask questions. They ask, what's the purpose of what we're doing? And
Hmm.
they actually, the oldest and the youngest generation in the workplace right now, they are both really motivated by purpose. That's something they share. But still, the oldest generation thinks you need to, I'm more experienced, so you might want to listen to me, you
Yeah.
know? And it's not the way the younger generations work. They are really raised in a more,
Democratic.
yeah, and more in equal
Footing.
positions.
Yeah.
You're a human being, so we're talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I want to learn from you, but I can teach you some things too.
Hmm.
And so they're not as sensitive to hierarchy as other generations are. And I think one of the obstacles is also that the younger generations really choose life as work life balance is something they really grew up with.
Hmm.
And I think also because most of them have parents that worked really hard. Gen Z is the first generation that was really raised by two working parents mostly. Uh, and raised with help by grandparents. They, like we call them key children. And that's a really different way of growing up in the sense of also, self reliability, for solving stuff, and that's really, I think that's really a good thing. And I think if you talk to each other about those kinds of things, how do you want to solve it, or what's our common goal,
Hmm.
you reach each other in a faster way, but also I think the solutions are reach far more quality.
Yeah. So really give people from hierarchy perspective as a leader, give people the goal. Say this is the mission, this is the ballpark
Yeah.
that it has to be in. Now sort out
Yeah,
yourself how
which
you
way
want to.
you want to go towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about trust, to that you trust people to be able to get there, and
Hmm.
it might not be the road you would have taken, but that's fine.
Yeah. Uh,
You know?
if you go to the goal, if you
Yeah.
reach the goal, it's fine.
Yeah. And it gives people, I think, more space to be their own person going towards that goal, because one would, take the shortest road, and and the other one says, I want to look there, or I want to look there, or I'm taking this with me. That's fine. It's, if you have a deadline somewhere, they know I have this kind of resources, I have a certain amount of time, and by that time I will be there.
Yeah. And if you add a budget to it, they will be there
Yeah.
within budget.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if not, then you can have a discussion about that.
But I think the autonomy is some of that's actually next to attention. I think attention and autonomy are the things that, we can give each other as human beings, which are extremely important to grow and evolve as a human being.
You worked for, and I just wanted to touch on this briefly because I found it like really interesting. You worked for a Premier League team.
Yeah. You can call me out.
Okay, you worked for Man U, I think,
Yeah.
Manchester United, at the time that Erik ten Hag was the coach.
Yeah.
So I love analogies with football because I think football is sort of a way to describe how you form a team and how you deal with people, because there's, especially with these big clubs
Yeah.
like Man U, Manchester City, you have to not only put the team in place, but you also have to manage the egos, as I
Yeah.
call it. So
Yeah.
my question is, what did you learn about team dynamics, and how is inclusion even a thing in a company like Manchester United, or in a team
Yeah,
setting?
I think it's definitely a thing, but I think it's also, there are certain things that are really hard about big clubs like this. They're not only an organization that has people that work for them,
Hmm?
but they're also a club,
Yeah.
and this makes it really special. That's a special dynamic. Um, a group of people is
Hmm?
not the same thing as a team. Before you can become a team, you need to do some things.
Hmm?
I think what's also hard is that it's homogeneous, so it's men or it's women,
Yeah.
which can be a good thing, but it also lacks a few things. So that's, and I think what is hard is the extreme pressure that is laid upon these mostly young people. And I think most people really don't understand how much pressure that is. But I've looked at them, and actually I gained respect for them a lot, because and I also mostly, people say very easily they make a lot of money, so they should, put up with all of it. They have no idea how hard these people work and how little of a life they have left, um, and how
Outside the
hard it is.
football.
So it's really, I didn't go as often as I might have could have gone, I think, but for my work as a profiler, I didn't need to go there all the time, and it's almost impossible to work as hard there as I can do here because of the total distraction that is always there. It's like a madhouse. Yeah. So it's
House in
really
terms of
special.
madhouse in terms of people coming in,
Everybody is looking at
press
you.
looking at
Yeah.
you, supporters looking at you, different fractions of supporters, because that's also something that I think is less understood about football. There's not such a thing as a Manchester United or a Feyenoord fan. There's,
Everybody has an opinion.
yeah,
It's really, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. It's really, and it's really for young, a lot of these guys, they are 17, 18 years old
yeah,
or 20.
yeah.
It's really forming, but it's also, you can really, really damage people at a young age. So yeah, well, it was a very special time, and also it taught me a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you give me an example what it taught you?
That we're really too fast with our judgments about top sport. There's mostly, people say something about the intelligence level of football players or different kinds of athletes. They are treated like they should do everything or know everything that the people want from them, like they're puppets. They're not. It was really nice to, they are really lovely young people that have a lot of things to say, and they are just like everybody else. And I knew that already, but it's just proof to show. And I actually sometimes really felt sorry for them, actually, or felt compassion towards their lives. Yeah.
They're sort of treated like the FIFA game. Like
Yeah.
they're supposed to be robots and be able to execute to perfection every time. So if they give a bad ball, everyone in the stadium is like, how come a guy that earns so much money gives a wrong ball? But people
Yeah. And
tend to forget
also,
that they're human.
now, and it's really, if you come from, because some of the guys, they come from, having nothing, and then having everything, or being able to have everything that money can buy, but wanting, actually, because everybody wants something from you, but actually what you want is just to be held sometimes, and that somebody's saying to you, it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
I'm having your back. That's really, the loving, or the warmth, or the protection from other human beings. That's really something that's forgotten most of the time. Yeah.
So this is a really male-dominated part of the world, of the workforce, let's say. Although, did you also have any encounters with the women's team by chance?
No,
No, okay.
no.
Just curious. But I was wondering more in general, like we talked about leadership, we talked about generational differences. I was wondering how men can contribute to a more diverse and inclusive society and
I think
workforce.
by raising consciousness also amongst each other.
Hmm.
I think what I see in the practical sense is that things don't start at work. Mostly they start, in, I always pick the example of men having like a little race club, on Sunday morning, and then they go like biking. And in the app group, they share pictures of women, or of, making fun of other people, or these are the little things that you should actually start with, to ask yourself, is this what we should do? Because these little things, it's all little things that lead up to the bigger fact that people don't talk to each other about what they like, or that they don't like something, or that it feels offensive or not safe, or that it makes them feel weird.
Hmm.
And in the end, it's not our purpose, I think, as people, to make other people feel weird. We have to try to live together and coexist in the best way for all of us. So
Yeah, but
it's
that's
not.
also something that is forgotten on, I think, both sides of the debate, actually. I
Yeah.
was in a discussion yesterday. It was a panel discussion. I was not on a panel for context, but I was in the room, and there was a woman. It was about funding female founders, and then one of the panelists, a man, said, "Well, maybe we should talk about funding founders and not making the distinction between men and women, because in the end, if you have a diverse team, it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. I'm just going to look at you as a founder, as an investment object, and I should not discriminate. And then someone in the room said, yes, but for me as a woman, it's important to identify as a woman because it's part of my identity. So I feel a bit, yeah,
And
annoyed.
I think there's also still a real deep, grounded bias in this world, that women are less competent or less trustworthy because they also can have children. And if they have children, they're, are out of the work process for a little while or whatever the biases are,
Yeah,
but they are there. It's not, we should talk about these biases. I am not in every sense all for positive discrimination, but I do think that upfront, as founders, you should think about diversity, and try to find a network that delivers that kind of diversity to your startup. And I'm saying this because I support, and I'm in the advisory board of a tech startup in Amsterdam, and those are three really talented men, young men, uh, who are really into R&D and software, hardware. But they need you get a different kind of energy from different people. So I always say to them, and now they are getting somebody who's a little bit older and they're getting somebody who's 10 years younger than they are, so it's not only about men and women, it's also about where are you from? Because now they have different cultures, different ages. People contribute different things because of different aspects of their lives or
yeah.
culture. And I think what we can all do is keep on talking about it, and not silencing about it, but also trying to figure out, because it's not one size fits all, so what doesn't work for one organization can work for you for another. So keep looking at it as
And it
tailor-made stuff.
and it also has to do with timing. So things that
Yeah.
may not work now may work in 3, 5 years.
Yeah, people always say, we haven't tried this before and it didn't work. And then I always say, if you tried it before, it seemed to someone it was a good idea. So
Yeah,
it might now be,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's a nice bridge to my closing question, Kirsten. Uh, my so my mission is to make inclusion in tech the new normal by the end of 2032. Based on your work and your experience, what can we all do to get there? What is a common thing that all companies could?
This is actually a hard question. I don't know if there's something that all organizations could do. I do think that in the end, the solution is in our cultures and in our organizational cultures,
Hmm.
which take a little bit of time.
Hmm.
It's not an individual responsibility. Uh, it's a collective responsibility to address this and keep addressing this. If we want to solve the big problems that we have as societies, like climate change and all kinds of stuff, then we need to do it together. So we need every human being possible, and this should be, I think, the reason that we all try to go for it. But I think to try to be open as an individual really helps the collective to get somewhere.
Sounds like a great place to close. Kirsten Heukels, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If people want to learn more about you and connect with you, where
Yeah.
would you like to send them?
Well, we have a website. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The website is 142socialinnovation.com. Yes,
Yeah, we'll
they're
include
free
it.
to call me.
Okay. I won't include the phone number in the because that's going to be on the website, I suppose.
Yeah, I
But
think so.
I'll include the links to your website and to your LinkedIn in the show notes, of course. Once
Yeah.
again, thank you very much for an amazing conversation. Really enjoyed it. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, keep being awesome. Well, that's a wrap for episode 106 of Women Disrupting Tech with Kirsten Heukels on decoding human behavior in the workplace. Kirsten and I hope that you found our conversation as insightful as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Kirsten or me based on our conversation, please leave a comment on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I do read all of the comments. And if you'd like to learn more about or connect with Kirsten Heukels or Want for Two Innovation, please head over to the show notes for a link. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog. When you've enjoyed listening to this episode, you can leave a rating or a review on Apple or Spotify. Leaving a review or a rating helps other people find the podcast. And if you're a regular listener, please follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or YouTube. Following Women Disrupting Tech is a great zero-cost way to support Kirsten and my other guests in making inclusion in tech the new normal by the end of 2032. You can also follow the podcast on social media. On LinkedIn, follow at The True Story Company, and on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack, you can find the podcast under at Women Disrupting Tech. On Substack, you can also find in-depth stories and behind-the-scenes insight about each episode. And you'll learn about trends that I've identified over the past 100 plus episodes. So don't forget to subscribe on Substack for more Women Disrupting Tech. Finally, if you want to connect with me, you can reach me via email dirk@womendisruptingtech.blog or on Substack or on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, simply search for my name, Dirk-Jan Heukels, and you'll find me. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, keep being awesome.